Hey, everybody, we're glad you could join us today. So, by popular demand, we are going to do Zoho Social overview and best practices. This is actually our sixth webinar this year. You can check all the previous ones out over on our YouTube channel at YouTube/Zenatta. You can find us there. In this one, we're going to kind of give you a nice overview of Zoho Social. If you aren't familiar, we're going to discuss what social media management software is and why you need it. And we're going to do then a real high level overview of Zoho Social. And then we're going to kind of do a getting started. We're going to run through how you can set your account up from top to bottom, your brand, your social media accounts, how you can schedule a post, and how you can use it for audience engagement. And then at the end, we'll take some questions. If you've got something, if we see a question that comes up in the middle of the presentation that we think is relevant, we'll probably go ahead and answer it there as well. So as Wayne said, if you can drop it into the Q&A, that'd be great. So let's get right to it. Why do you need social media management software? Well, basically, it makes your life easier. If you're not familiar, according to Tech Target, it even has its own acronym, SMMS. It's an application or program that really allows you to manage all your social media in one place. And with so many different social media platforms out there, keeping track of where you're posting things, when you want to post things, what responses you're getting, what level of audience engagement you're getting, who's following you, who you're following, all of those kind of things, rather than having to log into 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different platforms every single time. This allows you to manage it all from a central location. So those are your kind of your core functions. You manage all of your accounts. You have a single pane of glass where you can look at all of your accounts. The ability to do all of that, it becomes a huge time saver. But more importantly, you can also see really where you're getting the engagement, what's working, what social media platforms are working for your business. And this is especially true if you're doing advertising and spending money on those platforms. You really kind of need to know what's your effectiveness of all of your general social media campaigns that you're doing. So with that, we're going to launch our first poll, and we'd like to know what social media platform do you find that you get the most engagement from your audience from? And so we've listed all of the top ones on here, and as you can see, I think we came up with 8 or 9. There's quite a few, so it's interesting to see how this pans out.
It's like, unsurprisingly, LinkedIn is a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think for business, LinkedIn is one of the fascinating ones. I'm also fascinated with Facebook. Facebook still generates a ton of business for a lot of people, and it has a large level of engagement, no matter how slammed it seems to get in the media. So we had trouble with people seeing these polls last time, so hopefully you can see it. We've got Facebook with 42%, LinkedIn with 67%, Twitter coming 25%, YouTube 17%. You could vote for more than one of these, so this is why these are totaling well more than 100. And those seem to be the big ones. 0 for Reddit, 0 for Quora, and YouTube with 16%. And there's the overall results. Hopefully you guys can see all those. All righty. So with that, we're going to do a nice little overview of Zoho Social. And Tyler, take it away.
Yeah, so we're going to just kind of walk through some of the key items here in Zoho Social. So as with most Zoho applications, they basically are going to list out all the different sections or modules there across the top. So we're going to start out here with the homepage. This homepage is going to kind of give you a top-down view of what's going on with your brand across all the different platforms. So up here at the top of the page, right, we have our brand health. This kind of gives you, data that's skewed over time, right? So is your audience growing? How active is your audience? How engaged is your audience, right? Are people kind of interacting with your content across the different platforms? And in that brand health section, we'll see kind of a common theme that's going to stretch across Zoho Social, is that's always going to break things down by those specific channels, right? So we see our Facebook audience, our Twitter audience, and our LinkedIn audience all kind of categorized differently, because you're going to want to treat and market to those audiences differently based on the platform itself. And then down there at the bottom of the page, we get our recent posts. So you can kind of see what's most recently posted out there to different platforms. Of course, again, kind of broken down by Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We kind of see here a little clue in for later that those two posts on Twitter and LinkedIn are actually the same, right? So you can do a little bit of cross-posting. And one of the interesting things about this view is that if you are to cross-post similar posts between two platforms, you can kind of see where it does a little bit better, right? So shorter text content's probably going to do better on Twitter versus, posting videos or blog posts are generally going to do a little bit better over on LinkedIn. And then the last little piece of the homepage here is what they call the live stream. The live stream basically gives you a quick view of specific interactions with your different media accounts, right? So here we see that the CRM Zen Show mentioned our primary account on Twitter, right? So it basically called out or @tagged Zenatta Consulting on Twitter. So we get to see that in our live stream, which can be nice because if you have different customers who are interacting with your brand, being able to quickly get a rundown of who has replied, who has retweeted you or mentioned you, gives you the ability to quickly see who you should hop in and engage with at a deeper level. And so moving on kind of across the top of the page here, we can move into the posts section. So unsurprisingly, this is going to be a breakdown of all the different types of posts that you have, right? So things that you've published out, things that you've promoted, right? If you kind of have a little bit of ad spend running and you're promoting posts, you can see any scheduled posts that you have coming up, any unpublished posts that are kind of in draft mode right now. You can pull up a calendar view of all of the different posts that you have scheduled out in the future. And then they have a specific section if you're using Facebook's lead gen forms, which are a form of paid advertising on Facebook. But so again, kind of as you'll see, common theme here is that this section or this page is broken down by the different brands. So up there in our box at the top, right, we see again our Facebook, Twitter, a personal LinkedIn, and then the company's LinkedIn. And by clicking any of those little icons, we actually can go in and select to see posts from that specific channel, right? So right now we're looking at posts that went out on Facebook, but we could also, filter this page based on Twitter or either of the LinkedIn accounts that we currently have integrated into Zoho Social. Kind of moving across the top of the page here, we have a section that we're going to talk about in a little more detail later. But the messages, monitoring, and connections are a couple different ways that you can manage direct engagement with your clients. So as you'd expect, messages is going to be people that have directly messaged you, and you're actually able to respond directly out to those messages. The one caveat, the one platform that it doesn't support direct messaging for is Instagram. But on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, you can actually route any of your direct messages into Zoho Social so that you can respond to them all from there. Which if you have a really engaged set of followers who sends you a lot of direct messages, having to flip between all those different platforms can be a pretty serious headache. And anyone who's engaged enough to send you a message, has kind of done some self-qualification, and you definitely want to get them a response to kind of nurture that. And one of our last little sections here across the top is the collaboration page. And inside of the collaboration page, you can basically work on posts together. So if you have a social media team, right, you could spin up a little draft post here. Inside of the draft, you can actually leave comments and questions for whoever created it. So we'll see kind of on this page, we're leaving a comment that we need to add a little bit more content here because this draft is looking pretty bare bones right now. You can also spin up discussions around these posts. So this wouldn't link to a specific post itself, right? But I could have a little discussion around, what type of blog should we have for this week? Maybe someone could respond, oh, let's do one about remote work, or let's do one about, Zoho Social and why it's a good platform for social media management. So you can kind of build out little discussion pages where your social media team can post some questions and get some feedback either from their coworkers or maybe from, whoever is kind of the manager of the social media platforms as a whole. And then the last little piece here inside of the collaboration page is the different types of posts. So this is kind of similar to what we'll see over in the posts section, except the UI here is just a little bit customized to be able to collaborate on those different posts before they actually go out. But so any posts that you're working on here in the collaboration page, of course, you could go over and actually push live from here or from the kind of master posts page. And then last but not least, we have a section for some pre-built reporting. So again, similar theme to the rest of the sections. It's going to break these down all based on your different social media platforms. If you wanted some aggregate reporting that looks at everything, you could pull all this into Zoho Analytics. But again, most of the time, you really want to treat all these different social media platforms differently. You don't really want to lump in reports or engagement from one with engagement from another, right? Because it might make it appear that certain platforms are doing better than they actually are. So as you kind of run down the page, right, you can look at a summary, which is going to give you kind of these aggregate KPIs. How many page likes? Do we get any new likes or likes from new people? How many posts are we putting out, and what's the total engagement of those posts? We can look at reports specific to our audience, which would be like a follower on Twitter, or someone who follows your page on Facebook, and see kind of specifically inside of that audience and inside of those followers who's interacting and liking all the different posts that you're putting out on a specific platform. You can also look at reports specifically based on engagement. So here we kind of see an average amount of posts per day, how many engagements we're getting on the posts over time. So ideally, you want to see, as you'd be posting more, you'd imagine you'd get, more and more engagement on those specific posts. So you can kind of get a rundown and maybe start to correlate, if a certain amount of posting is actually good or bad for your brand. Sometimes holding off posting a little bit less might get you a little more engagement per post. Then we can look at some performance and specific views. And these reports here are actually specific to Facebook. You'll get kind of a different set when you look at different platforms. But here you can look at basically your page performance. So what type of engagement are you getting on your page? Where are people coming from that land on your page? You can actually see, from what they call external referrers. So basically the page they were on before they hit your Facebook page, right? So you can see, if people are getting referred or routed to you from a different set of sources, which can be nice, especially if you have any type of affiliate or referral marketing. You can actually come in here and see, okay, so we're paying this person, $100 a month to refer us. The expectation is they're going to send 100 our way. We come in here and see, oh, they're only sending 15. So maybe we need to, reevaluate some of the spend that we have on these different referral sources. And then last but not least, we get some reports specifically on reach, which is a little different than interactions. It's based more on impressions. So impressions are going to be, if they see a post but don't like it, right? So all these different platforms have ways to basically track people as they're scrolling the page. So if you're to scroll down and you're to stop and pause on one of our posts, that's going to be an impression, even if you don't actually directly click on it and interact with it. So you can get your kind of some reports around those impressions here to kind of see the reach or how broad of a net you're casting with your different posts. And then last but not least, we have our settings up here at the top, right? So in here, we can basically see a couple different sets of settings that we have around our brand, our social channels, and then our user management under members and roles. So with that, I'll kind of kick it back to Brett here, who's going to walk through how to set up a brand inside of Zoho Social.
Thank you, Tyler. So what is a brand? Well, so a brand is going to basically be maybe something in your company that you want to promote. So we actually have a couple of brands that we work here at Zenatta. You kind of see them at the bottom of the screen. We have Zenatta Consulting. That's the CRM Zen. So we have got all sorts of pages set up. So we have social media accounts for each one of those. So Zenatta has a variety of social media accounts. Twitter, Facebook, as you would expect. Same with the CRM Zen Show. Well, sometimes we're going to want to post strictly to Zenatta. Sometimes we're going to want to post to the CRM Zen Show. And sometimes we're going to want to post to both. So by setting up brands, you can basically set up those brands and connect the various accounts that are going to be associated with those brands. Zoho Social can be used by a company, and it can also by agencies. So you actually have agencies that are managing several different companies. So they might want to be managing hundreds of different brands. So they actually have a version set up specifically for agencies. So the first thing you want to do to get started by setting up your brand is you're going to need to make a connection. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and we're going to connect to LinkedIn. And Wayne was setting this up, so he went ahead and he logged into his LinkedIn account. And as you can see, he actually manages a couple of pages here. He's got the CRM Zen Show, he's got Zenatta Consulting, but he's actually going to set up a whole new brand associated with Wayne Keene. So he's got his Wayne Keene brand, and he sets that up, and now he's got his own brand. His brand is done. So what do we need to do next? Well, now we need to go ahead and we need to start, now that he's got the brand set up, it's time to go ahead and then start adding in all of the different brands, all of the different social channels you want to do there. So you can go into your brand settings, you can go ahead and you can configure it, and then you can start going in. We're going to edit the brand. Maybe he doesn't want it to be called Wayne Keene. So before he starts in his social channels, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the name of this overall brand. And once you've done that, well, then the next thing you need to do once you get your brand done is you want to go ahead and set up those social channels. So with that, Tyler's going to talk a little bit about going ahead and setting up those social media channels.
This is a pretty quick and painless process with Zoho Social to make it pretty easy here. So we'll start out by going to the top right under settings, and then we'll drop into our social channels here, as you'd expect. And basically, once we have a brand set up, right, we have the ability to connect different social channels to this brand. So here we're going to start just by connecting a Twitter account. Again, it kind of uses all the modern best practices. So all you really need to do to set up this connection is go through and use your Twitter login, or if you're using Facebook or LinkedIn, you'd use that login information. And then you can basically authorize this connection. And just as easy as that, you are now connected to this specific brand. And as we're talking about this, we actually just had a question come in from Russ, so I'll just kind of talk through that here. So there's the difference between a brand and a social channel. So I'll use Zenatta as an example. So for us, we have Zenatta Consulting, the brand, right? And that's kind of the umbrella term. And each social channel would be like our Facebook page, our LinkedIn page, our Twitter page. Each of those is a specific channel that we use to promote our brand, right? And so underneath of a specific brand account, you can basically connect all those different types of channels. Now, it gets a little confusing when you do the setup because you create a brand by first connecting your first social channel. So that can kind of be a little bit confusing because you feel like it's just a social channel that you're creating at that point. But you're actually creating the brand umbrella with that first channel, and then you can layer on the additional channels to that brand.
And again, to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, so the reason you want to do that, so if you look at CRM Zen, so you could connect a different Instagram, a different LinkedIn page, a different Twitter page, a different Facebook group, a different Facebook page for CRM Zen, and then under the exact same brand, connect all of those social channels for Zenatta Consulting because you have separate pages for all of those. Most companies, that's not going to be the case. They're just going to have one. But, oftentimes this gets around products. So companies maybe have different products and they have different brand channels for those products that they promote where people are discussing those. So there's a lot of different uses for that as well. So now we're going to dive directly into creating and scheduling a post. This is kind of the meat of everything. So in this case, it's actually we're going to look at a real post. So up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see you've got create a new post. That's kind of where all the magic starts to happen. We've got the brand set up. We've got the accounts connected. So now it's time to actually get some content out there into the world. So once you click on create a new post, then you're just going to go ahead and start crafting it. You want to see up top here, though, here are all of the different brands that are being connected to this post. And so one of the things you're going to want to do with those is maybe you say, you know what, I don't want to send it to one of these brands. Well, you can just click on it and or to one of those social channels, I should say, and it's going to take away that social channel. So even though you've got all these connected to your brand, you can still, when you're sending out a post, say, you know what, in this brand, even though I've got these 4 social channels connected to it, I'm going to be very particular about which ones I want to send this post to. And there's a lot of reasons for doing that. Twitter uses @ symbols, and Facebook uses hashtags. And so maybe you want to craft and Twitter is a limited number of characters, and Facebook and LinkedIn aren't. So even though maybe you have similar content, maybe you'll want to customize it for each one of the channels that you're sending out to for within that brand. So there's a lot of reasons you might want to do that. Then at the same time, maybe you just want to send it out to everybody whatsoever. So a nifty thing is, you want to get these mentions in and you want to get the hashtags in. So in this case, you can see that we started typing join at Zenatta Consulting. And as you did that, the actual Twitter handle for us came up, and you can just click that, and so you can easily start adding in your mentions and your hashtags based upon each and every single one of your social channels that you're connecting to. So it makes it really easy when you're starting to build these posts to make sure you've got the hashtags and the at mentions, they're proper, and you're looking them up and you're not mistyping them and perhaps referencing someone else. So in this case, you can see we basically did join Zenatta Consult tomorrow for our webinar, and on Zoho Social, and we did the at Zoho Social. So that's a call out, a mention of Zoho Social, and a mention of ourself. This is what appeared earlier when we were looking at the at mentions that come in. And then it's got the URL there, but that's a lot of characters in that URL. So one of the other things you can do in the post is at the bottom, you've got these little control icons. And one of these is go ahead and shorten the link. So Zoho has a built-in link shortener. So that button and it's going to go ahead and shorten that link. So if you've got a longer Twitter post and you're running out of characters, and it does keep track of your characters, you'll see up here it tells you how many characters you've got left, in this case 123. You have that ability to kind of shorten the link, play with it, make sure you're getting all the exact content you want in. And then you probably want to add images to your post. So you've got a couple ways of doing that. You can click on the little image icon. You can go ahead and upload an image. You can choose the image you want and go ahead and add that into your post as well. And then off to the side, you can say, I want to publish it now. I want to schedule it for a specific date. I want to repeat this post. I want to add it to the queue. You've got all sorts of kind of things you can do with that. In this case, we're going to go ahead and we're going to schedule it for 6 a.m. on today. And there it is. It's all done and we're ready to go. If you wanted to, though, and you said, I changed my mind, I really kind of want to put that out now, you can always go to your posts. You can see everything you've got under the schedule post link. And you can just go ahead and here, while this post is scheduled, you can click on this little more icon. You can discuss it. You can embed it. You can move it to draft. You can do all sorts of things. So this is kind of where you can get that level of engagement that Tyler was talking about earlier when he's talking about the overall collaboration area as well. Or one of the things you can do is you can just go, there's the little paper airplane there, and that's basically send now. So if you do that, you can go ahead and say, you know what, I know I got this scheduled, but I changed my mind. I just want to go ahead and post it out. And if you click that, it's going to go ahead and give you one last warning before it sends it out. You can say, that's fine. Go ahead and publish it. And away it goes. And now it gets posted directly to Twitter. So this is what that post would look like inside Twitter. It's CRM Zen from @CRM Zen Show. And it says join Zenatta Consult. It references that. It references Zoho Social. And it's got the image added. And it's as simple as that as far as getting a post out. Really, really straightforward process. And with that, we're going to take this to one more poll. Okay, so we talk here a little bit about Zoho Social, and what we would like to know is what do you currently use? Are you using Zoho Social or are you using any of the other kind of four ones that are out there? And it makes a lot of sense that this audience seems to be very much engaged with Zoho Social as well as Hootsuite. If you look at the overall results, you can see Buffer got a couple, Hootsuite got a few, Sprout Social got some, and then Zoho Social came in the lead with 9. I will tell you, the other half of you, so it's a 50-50, 9 people using Zoho Social, 9 not. Zoho Social is fantastic. It's, we talk about our applications all the time at Zenatta. We have a resources page where we talk about applications we highly recommend. Zoho Social is one that we do highly recommend. And I would, I think if you're using Hootsuite or Sprout Social or Buffalo, you're going to find you really like Zoho Social. And with that, we're going to move on to our next section here, which is audience engagement. Tyler?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. So audience engagement is basically the few tools up at the top here that we glanced over a little earlier in the presentation around, your messaging, your monitoring, and then tracking your connections. So let's go ahead and start off with the messages here. And so inside of the messages tab, basically you can track, again, how we're used to seeing it here in the top left. We'll have the ability to pick which brand or which social channel, pardon me, I should be specific there. So we can choose which social channel we want to see messages from, or we can go ahead and look at all of the messages, regardless of which channel they came from. So again, this kind of just gives you a single view to look at all of those different messages so that you're not having to flip between different URLs, right, to message out of Facebook and out of Twitter and out of LinkedIn all independently. Then moving across the top here, we can move over to our monitoring section. So the monitor, we're here kind of looking at the Twitter monitor section. And basically what this does is it breaks down a couple key things that you'll want to track on a day-to-day basis. So over on the far left, we'll see the mentions. This is basically going to give you any post that this social channel was mentioned in, right? So we see, each of these posts is going to have the @Zenatta Consult. So it's kind of calling us out here so that we can easily see anything where we're tagged, right? Because those are going to be the types of content that we definitely want to respond to or maybe promote ourselves. Then moving across the page, we can see the timeline. So this is going to give you, real similar to if you're on Twitter itself, basically a rundown of any posts from different groups that you may be following, right? So we see a post from Twilio, we see a post from one of the people that we follow, right? Kind of just running down the page. So these don't need to be specifically mentioning us to show up here, but it's just a nice way to kind of get a quick look at your Twitter timeline without having to go into Twitter itself. And then lastly, there's a little section around world news that just pulls dynamically in from Twitter, so that as you're looking at this page, you can go ahead and just get a quick glance of what's going on, what you need to be aware of as you're kind of in this monitoring mode. And last but not least, we can go ahead and look at our different connections. So there's a couple different types of connections that it'll kind of break down for you. The first of which, and probably one of the most useful here, is the recently engaged. Again, this is going to break them down by the different channels, right? So we can look at all the people that have recently engaged, as well as people that have engaged specifically on Facebook or Twitter. And again, that's just the little top bar here that kind of goes across all these different channels. Then we can look at the most engaged people, right? So unsurprisingly, CRM Zen is one of our most engaged people on Twitter, right? Because that's an account that we use to, tie and kind of cross-promote content that Zenatta makes versus the podcast content on CRM Zen. And then lastly, we can kind of look at some specific types of engagements or connections, like our Twitter followers or people that we may be following on Twitter, right? And that just gives you a quick little rundown of, any of the people that, you're following or that may be following you. And then last, but definitely not least here, if you have the CRM integration turned on, you can look at any records that are engaging with your content that might be CRM leads or contacts in your system. Again, it's going to kind of make that connection based on the email address of their account versus the email address that you have in the CRM. And, we'll probably put out a couple separate videos around that integration and kind of setting that up and what that means. Because the short story is that, you can have different types of engagement actually right into the CRM as leads or contacts. And then you can continue to track their engagement with your content over time using that functionality. And then last but not least, functions that we wish we didn't have to have, but it's definitely nice to see, is you're able to actually manage any restricted accounts. So people that you may have muted or blocked over time, you can go ahead and take a look at any of those people, all within the connections umbrella.
All right, and with that, that's going to take us to our question and answer section. So Tyler, what do we got?
Yes, we've been kind of running through a set of the questions here. Maybe if you want to pull up some of the answered questions and add a little elaboration to some of those as we run down. We have a couple more open questions here, which I can kind of run through and get some preliminary answers. We can circle back around and expand on those.
All right. So, I'm seeing here on some open ones. Does it monitor Instagram post as well? Yes, it does. That was answered as well. Will this webinar be recorded and sent afterwards? We don't send it out afterwards. We will send you a notification. It is recorded and edited. So any gaffes we made, you won't have to listen to those anymore. And posted on our YouTube channel over at youtube.com/Zoho /Zenatta. And then we asked, can Sales Navigator from LinkedIn use this? Tyler, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the Sales Navigator integration actually runs directly through the CRM. So there's a little plugin that you can install through the marketplace that will allow Sales Navigator to kind of show up as a little widget on a lead or contact page, and kind of expand on all their different LinkedIn information there. But to my knowledge, there's not a direct plugin for that through Zoho Social.
And I will say that Sales Navigator from LinkedIn, it's going to cost, I think, for the version you have to have in order to work with the Zoho plugin is not the lighter version. It's the more expensive version. And depending on what you want to do, and most of the time in Sales Navigator, it's pulling that data into the CRM so you can kind of see that person's history inside the CRM. You may want to look at an application that we talk about all the time called Link Match, and it's linkmatch.net, linkmatch.net. And this is $9 a month and allows you to basically be on LinkedIn and you see someone and you say, boy, I'd like to pull their information to the CRM. And it'll tell you, number one, if they're in your CRM currently, and if not, it allows you to quickly add them into the CRM. And that's a really, really great application that I recommend people look at. It's one of those social management tools. I think I personally in sales use it on a daily basis, and I recommend it a lot. All right, then we also answered this question. It was, is there a way to tie social media engagement to the CRM? So if a contact in the CRM engages, it goes into the CRM notes. Tyler, you answered this one?
Yeah, so kind of the couple different ways that the CRM integrates into Zoho Social. The primary way is basically writing, people that reach certain engagement thresholds, right? So liking a post, commenting on a post into the CRM as a lead or as a contact. And then in the CRM, once you have that connection made, you can actually match their engagement with a couple scoring rules, right? So you could say if they like a post, give them 5 points. If they comment, give them 10. And that kind of all runs through the CRM social integration. I don't believe with the default integration, there's any way to write in specific comments that they may have made into notes. Do you know anything about that, Brett?
I don't believe there is any right now at this point in time. So
might be able to do something through Zoho Flow potentially, right? Kind of a custom integration to tie that in, but it's not in their pre-built tools.
All right, so should we tackle some of these open ones here? So is there a quick search function within Zoho Social, a way to search for users of keywords without having to create a saved search column for it first? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think I've ever tried to search Zoho Social. Anybody doing that on the back end here on our team? Can let us know that. We'll get back to that one. I don't know if you can do that or not. I find people on Zoho social media accounts typically use a junk email address, so I'm not sure how well it will connect with the CRM. I find that can be the case on some social media accounts. I don't find that's the case on LinkedIn, though. So I think that if you're kind of pulling from there, you're usually in pretty good shape. And that's usually not the case on Twitter either, because you kind of have to be verified to make that work. So haven't really run into that all that much. Anything you see here, Tyler? You want to answer?
Question about inviting certain contacts in the CRM to follow your Facebook page. You could always create a little email template inside the CRM itself, right? That kind of links out to your page and shoot it out that way. But it wouldn't really be a specific function that would run inside of Zoho Social. But you definitely could kind of create a little template, pick the different types of people that you want to send it out to, and then send that out directly through the CRM, because that's kind of more of the email tool in the bunch. If you want to be a little more sophisticated, you could also use Zoho campaigns to do that. But I think for kind of a quick little email like that to a set group of people, the CRM can definitely get the job done.
And then we have a client here. If a client is using Zoho Social, can an agency also manage their Zoho Social accounts using Zoho Social as well? Yes. So two ways of doing that. They could either give you access to their Zoho Social account and you could manage it for them there. Or if you're an agency, you actually could set them up as a brand and go ahead and link all of their accounts as well. It doesn't really limit like, oh, this account's already linked to another Zoho Social account. So you can do that. It might be, actually, you'd end up with the same data on either one. So I'm not sure there's any benefit to doing it one way or the other, except for maybe collaboration on posts and those kind of things. You'd have them in two separate areas. So probably be best just to get either give them a login to that brand on your account or vice versa.
We had a quick question about what does likes lost mean. That was looking at the Facebook reporting. Basically what likes lost is they break down likes on Facebook into two different categories. So you can either have new likes, I guess 3 different categories, I should be more specific. So you have repeat likes, you have new likes, and then you have lost likes. So I'll give a quick example of kind of what the difference is. So let's say I post out my first ever post on Facebook and I get 200 likes. So all 200 of those are going to be new likes, right? And let's say I post my second post out and 100 of the people that liked my first post like the second, and then 200 new people like that second post. So I have a total of 300 likes on post number 2. 100 of them are going to be repeat likes. 200 of them are going to be new likes, but I've lost 100 likes because my original post had 200 people and 100 of them didn't like the next post. So it's a little bit of a mouthful, but it basically is trying to track if these likes are coming from people who are already engaged or newly engaged, and then which people have kind of dropped off or stopped liking your posts. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's not the perfect metric because it relies on the assumption that someone should be liking every post that you put out. But it's just kind of one different way to kind of look at the makeup of the engagement on your specific posts on Facebook.
All right, and we have a question. Can you schedule email campaigns on Zoho Social? You cannot, but you can schedule social media posts in Zoho Campaigns. So you can actually set up a campaign using Zoho Campaigns, which will have emails that will go out. And in that sequence, you can also go ahead and do a social media post. You can even make it a simultaneous thing where 2 things happened at the same time. The email goes out and the social media post goes out. But it doesn't work in reverse. Zoho Social only allows you to do social media posts. It doesn't really allow you to go ahead and send out any emails.
So you have a question around posting directly to Facebook or Twitter versus posting through Zoho Social. If Facebook is kind of picking up that you're posting through social and deprioritizing the post, I've not heard of that happening. I mean, on Facebook's end, I'm sure they would know that post is coming via API from some type of management tool, but I'd be surprised if they were deprioritizing it. I'd be interested to look into that, but it's not something that I know about them doing right now. I mean, it might be a difference of if you've set specific budgets in the 2 different places and the budget's different or something like that. It could be prioritizing whichever one has a higher budget. But I would imagine that they wouldn't be deprioritizing any posts coming from an outside tool just because so many companies use things like Hootsuite or Zoho Social to do this. And a lot of their spend content probably comes from people who are using those tools. So I'd be a little surprised if they're deprioritizing it, but I don't know for sure what Facebook is doing when they see that a post is coming from some type of outside source.
And then we got a question here. Does Zoho Social integrate with or manage your YouTube channel? It does not, but we sure wish it did. I know that is a feature request that comes in. You can't manage it there, but if you are looking to pull in data and kind of aggregate that data, what we do is we actually pull it in using Zoho Analytics, because Zoho Analytics does have very nice tie-in to pretty much all of the social media platforms. And so it doesn't allow you to do any engagement or any posting on YouTube, but at least you can kind of compare what's getting some traction and what's not. I don't know, Tyler, you want to add anything? I know you've done a lot of work on that.
Yeah, so I think the main reason that it probably doesn't run through Zoho Social quite yet is the bandwidth. To be able to post out an entire video via API like that, especially if you're posting like 1080p, 4K, is just the server load on Zoho, I think they're a little nervous about, rather than I'm posting a link to a video, right, through Twitter or LinkedIn. So that's probably why they haven't done it yet. Yeah, I mean, we use Zoho Analytics for all of the reporting pieces, but unfortunately, there's not quite a tool that I've seen that would actually allow you to like manage or schedule out those posts. You can go on YouTube and schedule them there, right? So it kind of has that same type of functionality. But yeah, it's not quite something supported in social yet, but as we've been trying to grow and work more on our YouTube channel, we know we'd love it. So, and let's see here. So we have one more question here around the lead generation settings. So this is kind of one of the tricky ones, and it depends on everyone's privacy settings, right? And so it's one that, is kind of going to be on a case-by-case basis. But basically the question is, when someone likes or comments on a specific post, he has it set up to create a lead in the CRM, but it's really only grabbing their first and last name. And, basically his comment here is that's great and all, but you can't really do much with just a first and last name, right? You need an email, a phone number, something to kind of give you a way to get in touch with that person. So again, it kind of depends on the privacy settings of that person, right? So if they expose their email or expose some of their contact information, it can kind of search for that and look it up and pull it in. But again, a lot of people do have things set to private when it comes to social media. So one of the kind of workarounds for that, and it's going to generate you less like direct leads than just, relying on a like, but you can kind of set up different forms and things like that you could link out to in the post, right? And integrate those to the CRM and actually tie in and capture a little bit more information. But I think that the primary reason that you're seeing that happen is mostly because, a lot of people have all that information locked down. And it's depending on their privacy settings that each of the different followers has.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. So, Ben, I think it's even worse with Twitter. Sometimes all you actually get is just a Twitter handle. But at least you can then link back to the person when you get the Twitter handle and you can take a look. Oftentimes I'll just use that as something to maybe cross-reference because maybe these people are already in my contacts. Maybe they're already in leads. You might want to do a dedupe. It's really not very efficient. But at the same time, I still leave that setting on because it's kind of a reminder. Maybe I'm not checking Zoho Social, and maybe there's a high level of engagement where people are coming in on a post. It kind of becomes a flag for me. I don't think that really works if you end up with just a ton of people kind of coming in because you really can't manage all of that. But on a manual basis, if the leads aren't that much, then it's kind of something where you can kind of take a look. All righty.
So we had one last little question that we actually answered in text, but I do want to highlight it. It was around when you're scheduling posts. One of our attendees noticed a little tab for a smart queue, because one of the things you can do is actually set up queues for the post and say like, this is going to go out first, and then 3 days later, this is going to go out. And what the smart queue is once you've run a lot of posts through Zoho Social, and maybe if you're running them, you're going to be kind of changing when they go out. So maybe I'm going to try posting in the morning for a week, posting in the evening for a week, right? What Smart Queue will do is actually look back on a channel by channel basis and look at which time slots or which days of the week, all these different types of parameters might work best. So if the system notices that when we post on LinkedIn, posting a video on LinkedIn or link out to a YouTube video on LinkedIn seems to do best in the afternoon. So if it identifies that we're posting out a video or a link to a video through Zoho Social to LinkedIn, it might say, hey, I've noticed that those posts get 20% more engagement. So it can kind of recommend that for you. The trick is, if you want to use that functionality, which I'd advise over time, is that when you get started with Zoho Social, vary things up a little bit. Kind of treat it as like learning mode for a month or two and kind of figure out, try some different times a day, different days of the week to kind of post things out, because that'll generate a data set that Smart Queue can use to start suggesting the best times and days to post things out. So it's a pretty nice little bit of functionality that you'd really only get with a management tool like this. But the trick is it just needs a little bit of training, right? It needs some data to look at to make it more accurate.
Fantastic. Well, we want to thank everybody so much for dropping by, and we look forward to seeing you next month. If you want to get a hold of us, all of our contact information is on the screen. Please subscribe to our newsletter. We cover this, and it seems like every week we cover everything that happens in the world of Zoho, and it's a lot. Show goes. We also have a podcast. We'd love for you to listen to our podcast. You can watch it on the YouTube channel, or you can just find the CRM Zen Show on pretty much every single podcast app. That's it, everybody, and we'll see you next month. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks, everyone.